I love that, man. And I appreciate you taking time out to address that. And then I cut you off. If you could talk about how you would do the same in relationships.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's funny that you mentioned relationships because we've been hearing about disentanglement word a lot lately, right?
Jada
And
Pinkett, man. Woo!
Jada, you know. And so sometimes when I think about that, it's all an absolute thinking, right? I think about cheating, all absolute, right? And I talk about the importance of being able to have certain conversations with your partner to eliminate the gray areas, right? And so in this way, you know what is cheating, what is not cheating. It's me texting somebody, it's me sending a picture, me liking a picture, it's me going on a date, whatever it may be, whatever that is, there's a conversation that y'all need to have to further define what is infidelity or not within your relationship. And know that that can change in the beginning and it can move 6 months later to a year later, whatever case may be, depending on the level of trust, depending on what has happened, what has occurred, right? And so I have conversations with couples that, maybe one partner's in there, it's like, my partner cheated. The other person's like, no, I didn't cheat. No, I didn't. Right? Because they have different perspectives regarding a very common word. Right? And so then I have to kind of work through them or work with them to figure out, is there maybe a boundary violation that took place? Right? Can you admit that maybe you didn't all absolutely cheat, right? But maybe there was a boundary violation. Maybe you tethered that line a little bit closer than what you should, right? And that's usually where the conversation has to start, right? It's not until they're able to kind of view things from that way that, like, maybe there was something that I could have done better, I shouldn't have done, that we're able to work through some things, right? And so in those situations, being that we all have different expectations, all have different views on what cheating is, having an absolute thinking, that may not help them work through their relationship. They may not help them heal through whatever trauma or experience that they may have. And so I really try to help them recognize, like, yo, there's a lot of gray area. And again, if awareness means opportunity for change, let's be aware of what this gray area is. Let's be aware of what this looks like for you all. And let's make some things very definite, make some things very clear. I kind of call it like the code of conduct for your relationship, right? Like you have a code of conduct for a business, you have a code of conduct for organizations, or whatever the case may be. I have a code of conduct for your relationship. How are you going to maneuver with your partner, right? What is that going to look like? What conversations are okay to have? What things are okay to do? And not only that, what are the consequences for these things, right? And so if we're talking about if you're going to engage in these different behaviors, this is the consequences of it, right? The consequences could be good or bad, depending on the situation, right? And so really having them understand and work through these things so they can be on one accord instead of just taking kind of what their perspective is and what the other person's perspective is and just leave it as that. Because if we have that perspective, we're not going to get anywhere, right? And so utilizing that space or even that gray as an area to help them grow either for themselves or with one another.
I love it. The gray is where we grow.
Yeah.
That might be the title of this episode right here. Um, in terms of relationships, and I love that you talked about how a boundary has been violated. I think that well, let me just talk from my perspective at least, and I've talked to so many people who are high achievers, and where they struggle is in relationships. I had Kamal Ravikant on a few days ago. He wrote, "Love yourself like your life depends on it." And even though he's an entrepreneur, he was in the military, he's hiked the Himalayas, he's achieved so much. He's a lot of startups in Silicon Valley. And I asked him what his biggest relationship challenge is, and he said, losing himself to the other person, giving
Yeah.
so much of himself over. And I think that what happens is that uh, we struggle with the boundaries that we have set for ourselves in terms of how much do we give to the other person, and how much do we give to the relationship. Then it kind of spills out into other areas. How does someone figure out what their boundaries are, their own, because I could hear somebody going, well, how much of it is setting a boundary and how much of it is being selfish, and then we also have to be
Yeah.
flexible with the boundaries, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think when I think about how do people kind of create those boundaries for themselves or figure out, what is enough for them, I think about the importance of self fulfillment and self preservation. So what I mean by that is recognizing that we're not complicated individuals, we're complex, right? We have, if we will, like onions, we have multiple layers that we have to tend to in order to be the most effective or best preserved as possible, right? And it's important for us to be able to figure out what do we need to do in order to be able to take care of ourselves so we can take care of others, right? Because we're not taking care of ourselves, we can pour, but eventually that tank's gonna be empty. And unless we refill it, it's going to stay empty no matter how much you try to pour in other people's plates, right? And so it's being able to balance what you need to do to fulfill yourself and how much you can give to others. And so part of that is recognizing how much is in your cup, right? How much do you have in your cup? How much do you have at an emotional level? How much do you have at a mental level? How much do you have at a professional, spiritual, physical level to give to somebody else, right? But you have to be able to figure out first what you have in your cup so you can know how much you can pour to somebody else before you need to refill for yourself, right? And it's kind of like that counterbalance between the two. You have to be able to know what you need for yourself and be able to figure out this is what you can give to others without losing yourself or running your cup empty to the point that you can't fulfill it without any major interjection,